Hey there, sociology peeps. Here we are in your first kind of module assignment. I thought, man, I have to go right for it. We got to talk about coronavirus as it relates to our discipline and how we can try to understand it a little bit better. And if you're like me, this has been a difficult time. We're all doing our best. I feel very fortunate. Um, in many, many ways. But I know not all of you have had the same experience. With this post, you guys have the option to either write it out or make a video. I actually think it'd be really cool to make a video, but I know not everyone's into that. Um, just to kind of get some of your feelings out, get some of your ideas out, start thinking about how you can look at this from the sociological lens to get a deeper understanding of what's really going on. I'm recording this from my basement because I am currently in the middle of a remodel. Not only am I quarantined, but I've been stuck in pretty much a room with my family for the past since mid-January. That's been even more interesting. But again, I'm still a really lucky kind of person in this whole awful pandemic, right? A global pandemic. Sociology really asks us to look at the strange and the familiar, but with what's happening right now, it's pretty easy to kind of see some of the strangeness. And oftentimes it's when society has these dysfunctions that we start to look at the systems with a more critical lens, right? And we also start to realize what happens when they, aren't functioning so well. We start to realize how interconnected they are, right? So this is a global pandemic. The institution that it's mostly impacting is the institution of medicine and health. But we can also see how all of these parts are interconnected, right? How this pandemic is impacting the institution of the family, right? I had to just go tell everybody right now, since my whole family is here, please don't interrupt. We have one room. And so not only am I working from home, but I'm also parenting and trying to homeschool, whatever. Doing my best, right? To have her not on her iPad all day is pretty much what I've come to the conclusion of just doing my best, right? And going easy on myself. And I want that for you guys too. And that's why I want to keep this really informal and just get your feelings out in this post. Have some interaction with each other. But, so we look at these institutions that are impacted, but obviously our financial institutions, right? Like, not only are we worried about illness and death and all these things, but also what's going to happen to our economy and, what's going to happen afterwards with all of this, and will we have jobs, and, just what it's going to look like. Even the prison systems have been impacted. Many of you probably noticed that there are people positive in there, and what does it mean for them? I'm also, as a sociologist, one thing I've been thinking about a lot, and probably where I have a lot of privilege, is like how class plays into this. Most of you have seen how people like Tom Hanks and his wife Rita have been able to find tests, but most middle class, lower class people, we have no idea where to get tests. And again, if you could test yourself and you knew that you were okay, that would give you a lot of freedom, right? A lot of privilege to move about the world. On the other end, even think about how class is impacting, and I had to talk to my daughter about this because she's had a hard time. She's 8, by the way. I forget you don't really know her yet because I talk about her a lot in class. But she really wanted to go to her park, the local neighborhood park, which was recently closed down. And I had to talk to her about how, think about kids in apartments. We have a backyard. We have a forest. I'll actually show you here. It's kind of a mess right now because we're in the middle of a remodel, but I'm like, dang, girl, you have a whole forest. You don't need to worry about, there's some kids that are literally like stuck in their apartments all day. You can really see the distinctions in class. And of course, the other day I saw Arnold Schwarzenegger in his jacuzzi with a cigar in his mouth, just telling people, oh, it's okay, I did that pretty well. And I think you're living like in a small, compound, where you have all of these really nice, luxury type items. Probably doesn't sound as bad. And then again, we think about the healthcare system, and we know that those people who have the most wealth will do fare best, right? And so, again, we're starting to see how all of these systems are interconnected. I even think I heard a sociologist one time, and when we talk about the sociological imagination, she compared it to being a plumber. And you kind of go, what? And so you think about like plumbing and how most of the pipes are in the back of the wall. You're not really seeing this entire system that's happening, and you don't necessarily even have to think about it until that toilet clogs up and you got to call someone, and then they got to get into the pipes. And it's so sociology is kind of like that, looking critically at this stuff, looking at the back scenes that we're not always maybe aware of. Thinking about healthcare for profit at this point. How are you going to tell people it doesn't make sense for our entire system to keep moving if we're not going to treat people who don't have health insurance, because they're going to keep infecting others? And so you start to look at this a little bit more critically and going, well, that's not going to work anymore in this type of situation. So I like the plumbing analogy. It really gets us to kind of think about, what's going on behind the scenes. And again, when society's functioning well, we don't have to think about this very often. But when that toilet gets clogged, we start to realize it. So with this post, you might want to get a pen really quick and kind of jot down some ideas. So you can talk about, how your norms are, how your norms have changed on the everyday. So myself, to be honest, I've been wearing, you could call it real clothes. No, they're not. I've been wearing leggings and slippers. I'm not sure if you can see that most days. And I just kind of pull out what's on top of the laundry. It doesn't need to match. Very different than my norms. Like while I was in school, I, get dressed in nice clothes. I even noticed some of the rituals of repeated things that I do every day have changed. I'm sleeping in a little bit later, which I'm allowing myself to do for self-care. I hope you're doing the same. But then I'm staying up later, so my norms are kind of just different. The other day I forgot to take my medicine completely, just because my whole setup on my whole scene was kind of different. And so we're living really in unprecedented times, and I want you to think about that, right? We've never seen anything like this, and so we don't really have anything to kind of look back on. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately, and they talk about kind of the Spanish flu of 1918 and learning a little bit more about that, which was kind of similar to something like this. So we're kind of referencing history to get a sense of what to expect now. But generally, a lot of times what happens, and we talk about this in sociology, Durkheim, our father's sociology, was really big on this. And, you're going to learn all about this when you go into your chapter lectures, right? So Durkheim came up with this idea of anomie, or this sense of normlessness, or when our norms become unpredictable. And it can leave people to a really uneasy sense of feeling, and he even proposed would push some people into suicide, right? Or the interactions of things in how we interact. So norms become unpredictable, right? Leading to a sense of anomie, right? What does that mean? Well, we don't know what to expect anymore, right? For instance, my husband, who runs a business, he can't get materials anymore, so he's not really working. And we're like, well, when is our next paycheck from him going to be coming in? When is my daughter going to go back to school? And this can leave people with a real big sense of uneasiness. And Durkheim also said it was social integration that would keep us kind of feeling solid and secure and things like that. And, we definitely don't have that right now, right? We are actually very isolated, which, most sociologists will tell you we weren't meant to be living this way. So, you might talk about how your norms have changed, how you're noticing, how different groups are experiencing the epidemic very differently, whether it be class or race, which also intersect with each other. You might talk about, people who are living paycheck to paycheck, for instance, don't have the same types of luxury that maybe a middle class person like I do, where we can go out and buy $300 worth of groceries and kind of, let it sit there if we need to. But if you were living paycheck to paycheck, what does that mean? Families that have a little bit of savings are going to fare a little bit better than those people as well. So you might think about stuff like that. Um, and also in the long term, our sense of self, how is this going to change our sense of self? Um, my sister-in-law said the other day, I don't think we're going to be the same after this. She said, I don't think I'm going to be the same after this. How is this going to change the way we look at the world? So maybe you want to speak a little bit about that. And we are living through a particular piece of history, right? And that's going to give us a sense of understanding in terms of our behavior. Just to give you some perspective, so my grandfather, who pretty much was a child during the Great Depression, he was very frugal even though he had money. I remember him going to the 99-cent store and buying dented cans, and I'm like, you guys can afford cans from the regular grocery store. They ended up having quite a bit of money, but they had lived like this their whole lives, never spent extraneously. And part of that was because, this had impacted his family, the expectations and the norms. They never knew when they were going to get food again. My husband's father, his grandparents, there's a story about where he would get very upset if the refrigerator wasn't full all the time, and this is after later on, because that food scarcity, that is something that both of these men had lived through. And also understanding some of the behavior that we're seeing, right? So when we think about why people are hoarding food and rushing out and kind of this survival of the fittest type mentality, you have to understand that that's embedded in our culture under rugged individualism, right? We are, we are expected to kind of put ourselves first within the way our culture is set up. You see that embedded in our history, in the Bill of Rights, in our Constitution, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all of these individual rights. You even see it in the way we eat, individually packaged food, or in healthcare, everyone is expected to find their own healthcare. It's not sanctioned through the government. We marry for love. We marry for the person we want, not for the person that our families want, even if it might mean, economic security for them. And so, what we're seeing today, it's just a representation of how, we are rugged individualists, and, you wouldn't see this in other cultures. In the tsunami in Japan, we didn't see people hoarding food and things like that, because they don't come from this type of culture. They're much more collectivist. So again, all of this is allowing sociology to create some kind of understanding of the pandemic. We can think about, also how technology has really helped us continue our day-to-day function. Even 10 years ago, I don't think we would have been able to transition as quickly online to our classes and things like that. There were very few professors that were even teaching online, and even then, most of you use Canvas, so you know how to work Canvas, even if your classes were in person. I also want you to think about how this helps us determine, or helps us understand the types of things we value as a society. So, we're seeing things like young people and other people even going, oh, it's not going to impact me. I'm still going to spring break and things like that. You see the rugged individualists there. But also, that's making a statement. It's saying, we don't necessarily value old people. We're kind of saying right now, should we let people go back to work and kind of let the elders sacrifice? What? And again, in other cultures, it's just not this way. I mean, that would be the last thing you would do. But you have to understand the underlying kind of social forces like capitalism, right? Keep, young bodies, healthy bodies, keep society functioning. And old bodies aren't as valued for that reason, which is why we're all also trying to keep from aging all the time, right? Anti-aging creams and so you start to see the types of things society values. We value big business, right? You'll start to see a lot of this bailout money going straight to corporations, not the individuals. Yeah, so that might be another thing that you come to think about. So, with this discussion post, I want you to think about how the pandemic helps us see what society values. You might think about talking about what institutions have most impacted you with this shutdown and everything else. Maybe you've been really impacted because you're a grocery store worker, or because you work at a hospital, or because now you had to fly back to Hong Kong to be with your family when you thought you'd be at Green River. So how is this impacting you? How are you seeing the interconnectedness of these systems or institutions like medicine, criminal justice, the family, business, right? All of these things. How have your norms changed from day to day, right? Are you functioning differently? How is this changing your sense of self, right? Like, did you have a moral dilemma of whether you should go out or not and what that meant? And, I know for myself, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I'm really like, no, I don't want to go out because I've also had allergies. And so that's also impacted the way I'm coming to see this. And what if these aren't allergies? There you go, right? Just in case, what if these weren't allergies? And this was a week ago. So I was inside for the week just in case. And because I wanted to feel okay too, that I wasn't making things worse. And so these are all types of things. I also want to allow this video discussion point, or you type it out, that's fine too. But I want you to think about, I also want to allow you to vent. You can cuss, you can scream, you can give shout outs to your classmates. But I want to, if you're feeling sad, that's okay. You can talk about that. If you're feeling angry, that's okay. You can talk about that. If you're feeling scared, right? Try to pull in some of that sociology too. I think that's really important. Okay. So with that, welcome to the new world, right? We're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. I'm looking forward to the start of this course with you, and take care.